Checking in with Anthony and Glenn is brought to you by HD Supply.
It's checking in with Anthony and Glenn, teaching you to be the hotelier that you wanna be. It's checking in with Anthony and Glenn.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Glenn, what's going on,
Hey,
man?
great to see you today. I'm always excited when I get to podcast with you. I got a lot of energy here today, and probably because we're being hosted by the lovely Garden City Hotel on Long Island, probably the best hotel on Long Island.
First time I'm here, and I'll tell you, it's great.
It really is. And, I want to thank them for housing us here today. And we've got a great show for everybody here today. What we're going to do today is a little bit different. We're thinking of starting a new monthly feature of What's in the News. Everything exciting that's happening in hospitality that we think you're going to be interested in. We're going to share stories with you.
So who wrote the letter, the op-ed in the New York Times is not part of What's in the News for us? We're not talking about that?
Well, it was me, Anthony.
All right.
Yeah.
You're an executive in the White House. You're in the West Wing.
Oh.
And you wrote the letter. And you wrote the article in the New York Times, the op-ed piece. Glenn Haussman. We're breaking this here on Checking In with Anthony and Glenn.
Okay. All right. I got confused. I thought you were talking about the rant I did online about resort fees, not that particular piece.
Not that op-ed.
Oh, well, that was quite an editorial.
Yes, and I think that's for another day, another show, another podcast.
Right? When it first broke, I put that up on my Facebook page. That was quite an editorial because it says everything, but it says absolutely nothing at the same time, which is, I like to be mysterious.
And I always like to look at the psychology about that. And I was listening to someone this morning on the radio, and he said the first thing I'd want to do, he goes, there'd be two top priorities. One, find the person that wrote it, because I agree that that person needs to come out and that person needs to say, hey, this is what's happening and I resign, which is admirable and honorable, and leave. Okay? So I would want to know. So whether you're on the other side of the fence, you should know. Number two, I would ask my team, do I really suck? Like, what can I do to get better? Am I really this unhinged? So I really would find it fascinating if that happened, how I would react to it. And I think that's what I would do. I would want to find who did it, and I would want to find out if I'm really that narcissistic that I really can't see what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, all right. So two things. Number one, I think that whoever wrote that article should have watched the movie from the 1970s, Take This Job and Shove It.
Right.
Because I think that they would have learned how to present this issue in a better, more entertaining way for us. And then I think, secondly...
No, this is pretty entertaining.
And, secondly, if you're being accused of and potentially suffering from a raging mental illness, would you even be able to discern that you're suffering from mental illness and therefore be able to make those changes because people are calling you crazy? You're approaching it from a really rational point of view.
Well, is extreme narcissism, a mental illness?
I think so.
Okay, so then the answer would be no. But what's more interesting is the two worlds we live in.
Right.
You go on to CNN, and that's all they're talking about. And then you go into Fox, and they're talking about the Flintstones.
Right.
And it's like, what worlds are we living in? I think one network is covering it, wall to wall, and one network is covering, the color of the day. And I think it's just interesting in the world we live in, no matter what part of the world you're in. However, we're not here to talk about politics, because this podcast will never talk about politics. We are here to talk about hotel news. And there's nothing more exciting in the world, nothing happening in the White House, nothing happening in the world, than what's happening in the hotel business.
I thought we were here to talk about the Flintstones and how to make a good Brontosaurus burger.
Okay. For those people out there under the age of 30, you will not get this. Maybe even under the age of 40. But you know who my favorite character on the Flintstone was?
Bam Bam?
No. I knew you were going to say that. It's nobody you're going to think. It's no one that comes to mind. My favorite.
I don't even know.
Gazoo.
The Great Gazoo. The Great Gazoo was awesome. Brought in towards the end of the Flintstones run. Because, when you're already running out of ideas about prehistory, you might as well bring in a Martian.
Right. So I actually my mouth turned away from the mic when I said Gazoo for a second, because he would literally look up into the sky and just talk to this little imaginary character Gazoo, and it was kind of a little good.
Wasn't he the Great Gazoo or something like that?
The Great Gazoo. Yeah. Oh, I loved it. I loved it because like we all, especially as a little kid, you just want to talk to somebody that doesn't criticize you, although Gazoo criticized them. But anyway.
All right, so let's confuse our under 30 listeners a little more. The Flintstones was actually based on the Honeymooners, which was a 1950s television program with Jackie Gleason, of course, who starred in Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds, who just passed away as we were recording this. So you like how I'm bringing it back towards current events.
At age 82, and he was very self-deprecating. He was... he was a rock star actor, and he dated 3 or 4 people. But what I found, or he married 3 or 4 people. And one of the things I found fascinating was he said Sally Field was his one and only, which I found interesting because Sally Field was such a different type of person than, who was it? Lonnie Anderson. Lonnie Anderson. And for those people that don't know Lonnie Anderson, think about Sally Field being Mary Ann, and Lonnie Anderson being Ginger. And that's another reference to our childhood of Gilligan's Island.
We're here to educate, empower, and entertain all of you folks out there, especially your younger career-minded people. So I'm sorry we're confusing you so much, but don't expect us to change, because in a lot of ways, I'm still living in the 70s and 80s.
Right. So let's get back to hotel news.
All right, the hotel news in 2018, you're not going to believe what this happened. There's a gentleman named Robert Johnson. Really amazing accomplishments in his life. The first African-American billionaire. He created the BET television network, which was a cultural firestorm for the African-American community. Then went on to be one of the best hoteliers that we've ever seen in terms of developing and creating new hotels out there. Made absolute billions. And he was at the Oak Palm Beach Hotel on August 24th after a fishing trip. Tried to check in and was told he had to take off his sunglasses in order to check into the hotel. Then what happened? He said, no, they're the prescription sunglasses. I can't take them off. They insisted he took them off. A little back and forth followed, and he decided to leave. Wouldn't allow him to check into the hotel unless he did that. So he said, screw this place. I'm out of here. And then guess what? The Oak Palm Beach spokesperson said, and this is where I want to bring you in, it's standard operating procedure in the hospitality industry to ask guests to remove sunglasses for their quote-unquote safety. But Johnson, who owns 165 hotels, of course, said that's not true. You've been in this business a long time. I've been in this business a long time. Have you ever heard of something like that? And what do you think of the situation?
Everywhere I go, Glenn, I carry my manual, right? It's the Anthony Melchiorri Hotel Manual. So I'm going to open to page 27, paragraph 3, section C. And under guest removing sunglasses, it says bullshit.
Right.
Okay, so it's absolute, not only bullshit, it's infuriating. And, and I don't want to pass judgment, but think about where the hotel is. Think about the people maybe working at that hotel. Think about the policies. And it just really enrages me. But let's step back for a second. Let's think about this gentleman. This gentleman built the BET network way before Oprah, way before what's happening today. He built it when people from his background didn't get the opportunities that maybe some people get today, even though there's not enough opportunities. He really was an extraordinary pioneer. He was, and a lot of people, they don't talk enough about him unless I guess you're in the black community, but he was an icon. He's every bit a Bill Gates. He's every bit Elon Musk. He is truly an icon. Not only he had to go through the business turmoil, but he had to go through the turmoil of being an African American in this country. So to know that a man like that built such an empire, to walk into a hotel that's supposed to open its arms to people, and to go through something like that is just extraordinary. And there's not even close a policy that will allow me to appreciate what the front desk clerk or the manager was talking about. It's not even close. It's not like he was wearing a big hat or a hoodie or a baseball cap that covered his face and they couldn't see him. whether he was white or black. They literally couldn't see his face. That is understandable. I mean, I would like to see, I'd like to be able to see somebody. He's wearing sunglasses.
Right.
Every fisherman coming off a boat, going into a resort, or every person playing golf, coming off the golf course, going into a resort to check in, has friggin' sunglasses on. So it's insane.
The only time that I've ever been asked to remove sunglasses in my entire life, I think, is by the guy at the TSA. Right? And I totally get that because they're looking at your ID or your passport or whatever it is. But in a hotel atmosphere, I don't understand the reason for that at all. And it makes me wonder, on the larger size issue, how much, race is involved in something like that and how much poor training might be involved in something like that. It's a little controversial, but I sometimes wonder how much these issues get muddied.
Can I give you my personal feeling?
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
This is only my personal feeling,
Yep.
and I don't know. I have a lot of knowledge about this incident or that hotel,
Right, of course,
or the employees. But I'm going to say it's as close to 100% prejudice as you can come.
Yep.
There's, again, running hotels and having thousands upon thousands of guests check into my hotels. I have never come close to a policy that would suggest that someone's got to take their sunglasses off to check in. So I can't understand how poor training is affecting that decision. That is either a supervisor saying, "Hey, come here, I want to talk to you." Go in the back and say, that black guy over there, have him take his sunglasses off. Okay, I can't imagine a front desk clerk is making that policy by themselves, and I can't imagine that policy is in a written manual somewhere. So I'd hate to say that my instincts basically direct me to my lowest. The lowest common denominator, which is racism.
Yeah. I got to tell you, Anthony, I hate to say it, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's really sad. I feel as though, and here's us not talking about politics, but I feel as though having Obama as our president and being the first, African-American president, even though he's always half African-American, I never understood how that worked. If you're half of a race, why are you considered one particular race in the eyes of our public? But that's a much larger issue.
Can I answer that question really quickly?
Yes, please do.
And again, we're talking way too much about politics, which we said we wouldn't. But this really isn't politics. This is life. Because when he walks into a store, they see an African American there.
That's right.
They don't see a white person.
That's right.
So that's why I would imagine that's what people see him as. But let's not talk.
So I'm starting to feel that during that presidency, for a guy like me, I saw it as hey, this is an amazing thing. If we're able to elect an African American president, perhaps racism isn't as big an issue as it really is. Now, a couple of years later, after he's left office, I starting to feel like it's exactly the opposite. I can't have anything in me that says this is not racial profiling when it comes to a story such as this.
I was in the United States Air Force from 1986 to 1990. I remember coming out of the Air Force, and I turned to my brother and I said, "Man, it's amazing. Just in 4 years in this country, like, racism is gone." And he looked at me like, "Did you bump your head?" I was in the Air Force for 4 years, and I swear to God, I did not see one moment where I would ever think that anyone was being prejudiced against. Because when you're in the military and you have nuclear weapons and you have planes, we're all one team and we all depend on each other. So there's no room for that nonsense. Unfortunately, what you're seeing today, and you can't even say today because even under Obama, racism was rampant. Ferguson happened under Obama.
Right.
What you're seeing when Obama was in office, it was there. But now what you're seeing is the other side of it. And this country where we sometimes are lulled into a sense of everything's okay, now because it's so radical,
right.
The White House is so radical, or the thinking, or I shouldn't say radical because the thinking isn't radical. It's the president is very open with his thoughts, okay?
Right.
And really whatever he's thinking comes out. Mm-hmm. So I think it allows his base to just feel empowered. So you're really seeing that this country really is two people, and it's a shame.
Yeah, it really is a shame. And I'd love to hear from some of you folks out there in the audience if you've had these issues as you're trying to grow your career, but you felt that you've been stymied in some sort of way by race issues. I think that would be really interesting for us to learn more about. Educate us so we could try to help and empower everyone that's out there.
It's interesting. I'm going to bring a story from my history that comes back when I was a general manager, and I won't name the hotel, and I won't name names, but I remember putting together a policy about appearance, and I said, if I notice your hair or your jewelry before I notice you, it's too much. So we put some policies together. And there was this one young lady, an African-American lady, and she had a very, let's say, extreme haircut
right,
for the presentation
right,
of this first-class hotel. It was great haircut, beautiful young lady, but all I noticed was her hair. And because of the color, because of the height, because of the volume, and it wasn't that kind of hotel. I just walked in. Actually, we had lunch at the Four Seasons a couple of weeks ago, you and I, or a week ago, and the hostess, as we remember, her hair was just big and bright and light, and that was okay,
right?
Because we're in 2018, and that is the standard for that hotel, and it was fine. Mm-hmm. However, back 20-something years ago, I don't want to know a mohawk. A guy was wearing a mohawk, and that was extreme. And so we asked him to shave his mohawk, and then we had to wait for his hair to grow back.
Right.
Because having a bald guy 20 years ago was also extreme. But my point being is, so I asked the supervisor, please speak to this young lady, and the next time she comes back to work, please have her hair the way it was, or at least not, it doesn't have to be any specific way.
Right.
It just, I can't notice the hair before I notice her. So
right.
My supervisor says this: your haircut is culturally inappropriate. She was African American.
Right. Whose culture?
That's what she said. Your haircut is culturally inappropriate. And so the young lady obviously complained. She was in the union, complained to the union, and I was mortified.
Oh, God.
I was like, what are you talking about? It has nothing to do with her being white or black or Asian. It has nothing to do with that. I just asked a white guy 2 weeks ago to shave his mohawk. What would possess you to say that to this young lady? And she's like, well, that's what I thought you meant. I was like, did I say that?
Oh, my God.
That had nothing to do with it. So that was her own personal, and I know this woman was not in any way, shape, or form prejudiced, but for some reason she thought that's what I was talking about. And I was like, I was mortified. To this day, it's a low point in my ability to communicate, because now when I communicate policies, especially about appearance, I am hypersensitive. And I always say there's 3 ways to communicate. You write it down, you talk about it, okay, and then you put it into a policy book that you make somebody study. And you make them sign their name to. And that really came out of that policy. It's like, I'm still to this day, it's the first time I've ever spoken about it. It's the first time I ever really even owned up to it, because it was so appalling to me. I was embarrassed by it. But since you bring this subject up, I think it's really important that as a manager, mid-level manager, supervisor, or general manager, that when you're articulating a policy, you have to really understand who you're talking to, and you have to have sensitivity training in your hotels. Because something I would never have thought would come back as it's culturally inappropriate was offensive to me.
Yeah, I think that the whole idea of that is just offensive. So how do you then, create a sense of balance and a point of view for the look of employees that is culturally acceptable, but at the same time meets the standards of what you're trying to accomplish?
I truly don't think it has anything to do with culturally acceptable. I think it has to do with what's hotel acceptable.
Okay.
I think if I run a business, so
I get that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to be really clear here, so nobody misconstrues what I'm saying. Right. I think what we're talking about is sometimes people are easily confused, or if people are bringing some, their life history with them, they can more easily misinterpret what you're trying to accomplish at the hotel, and it could potentially be perceived as something that's racial when you're just trying to do it for the look and legitimacy of the hotel's staff.
If you're running Black Tap Shake and Burger joint in New York City and 11 other cities in the world right now, and you're telling someone that their hair volume is too much, you're being inappropriate, right? Because that restaurant is all about being cool and trendy and come as you are. If you're running 11 Madison and you're wearing hair that's 10 feet tall and is green, purple, and yellow, that may be inappropriate. So I think your mission statement and your brand basically dictates the overall appearance of your staff. Back in the day, I wouldn't allow people to have tattoos on their arms.
Right, and that's changing.
Okay, and that's changing.
I mean, even Disney is allowing people to have facial hair now.
Right. So, George Steinbrenner didn't allow his ball club to have, to this day, you can't have facial hair. If you remember, who was the gentleman that came from Boston back about 10 years ago? He had a beard and he had a mustache and he looked completely different. The next day he signed with the Yankees and he had a shave. And someone asked him, it's like, oh my God, that must have been so hard for you. He goes, they're paying me a lot of money to play baseball.
Right.
I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to understand, I think what you're getting to is a larger picture of seeing what the opportunity is. And sometimes you need to conform to standards in order to make your career shine.
Right. So on one hand, it's like, if that young lady said, I'm not changing my hairstyle, I will absolutely confront that, and I will absolutely say, well, this is the standard, and let me show you examples of other people so you don't feel like you're being racially profiled. On the other hand, it had nothing to do with it being culturally inappropriate. So there's two things here. I feel it's like revenue management. One day the rate's really, really low, and one day the rate's really, really high. So I feel like I have an extreme understanding or point of view on both sides. On one hand, this is the hotel we're running. This is how we're running it. This is the standard. You signed the handbook, and this is what we're asking you to do, and this is how you were hired, okay? On the other hand, okay, you are allowed to question us, and you're allowed to make your statement, but this is the standard. We are not allowed to be inappropriate. We are not allowed to racially profile. We are not allowed to discriminate. And I would be the first person that would die on my sword if I saw anyone treating anyone differently. I mean, when I was a kid, I was always the smallest and skinniest kid growing up in 4th, 5th grade. I remember to this day, I punched this guy. I won't tell you his name because he's maybe listening to this podcast. I punched him in the face. Okay, literally, first time I'm in 4th to 5th grade, I went right up to him and I punched him in the face because he was making fun of a kid in a wheelchair. And I didn't say anything. It's the first and last time I ever punched somebody without hitting me first because I was so offended and so like, who the hell are you to pick on this person? And that kid that I punched in the face was so shocked by it, he didn't hit me back, and he could have kicked the living crap out of me. But it wasn't me being a tough guy. It was my immediate rage, and not so much that I was raised that way because I was raised by a single mother, had all kinds of problems, and I didn't see prejudice in my house. But it wasn't so much that I was being told that you have to stick up for people. It was just like I was born with like, how dare you treat anyone differently? I was born a short white guy that's relatively healthy. Okay? I was not born in a wheel. I wasn't born handicapped. I wasn't born with. If you're a white guy in this country, okay, you're a healthy white guy in this country, you're in pretty good shape. You should be able to be relatively successful because everybody else is basically prejudiced against, okay? Mm-hmm. So I just had this feeling that I had nothing to do with how tall and beautiful and handsome I am. I had nothing to do with that, right? So you're supposed to get.
I know. I'm actually in a dreamy state right now because you're so sexy.
So what gives you the damn right when you had nothing to do with the way you look or whether you feel like you should look or whatever?
Right.
What gives you the right to prejudice against anyone? So I didn't know you were going to bring this subject up, but
you just kind of stumbled into it.
As you can tell, like nothing enrages me more than someone. And let's bring it back to what it is. This gentleman is in this hotel, first-class hotel, And whether he's a billionaire or whether he's saved all his money for the first time to ever be in a great hotel, and you ask him to take his sunglasses off, it is beyond offensive, and it's not only poor training, but it's poor hiring.
Yeah, I think I agree. And the one thing I've never understood about racism is why hate somebody for who they were born when there's so many legitimate reasons to despise people out
I
there.
tell my children, the only people you're allowed to be prejudiced against are assholes. And they come in all shapes and sizes and all colors. So, I don't like an asshole.
Right.
But, yeah, so it's enraging. But think about that for a second. This gentleman, through all of this, built a $1 billion company, is seen as one of the greatest leaders of our time, and still he can't check into a damn effing hotel room without being prejudiced against. It goes back to, in Starbucks when they asked those two gentlemen in Philadelphia to leave.
Right.
When they just, waiting for their friend. Or when...
they were waiting to do a business meeting over there.
When you're an African-American trying to get a cab in New York City.
Right.
Or and maybe the taxi cab drivers are a bad example because if you have luggage, they won't take you to the airport. But that, it's just like, it's hard enough to support your family. It's hard enough to live in this world.
All right.
Now you have to complicate things. Well, if you're a woman, you're not you're not right for the job. Or if you're black, you're not right for the job, or whatever. Or you're handicapped, which is the most maligned population in this country. I was just watching something about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who went to Madison High School in Brooklyn, and who said you can't get a good education in a public high school. And she was a woman who was very quiet and went about her business in a very quiet and appropriate way. And in the 70s, she tackled one bias after another and really was the champion for women's rights, which I didn't realize. In 1970, I'm going to say 4, there was a case that came before the Supreme Court that she brought. It was about a young lady who was a officer in the United States Air Force, and she went to the Human Resources Department to get her stipend for housing. And said, well, you're married. Your husband gets a stipend for housing. You don't. It's like, what are you talking about? I should get a stipend, too. I'm a United States Air Force employee, a soldier. Right. Why don't I get a stipend? Well, only men get stipends. So in 1970s...
That's sick.
They had Ruth Bader Ginsburg. How do you say her name?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right. She had to fight in Supreme Court, and she won. And it's just fascinating to me that in 1970 she had to fight the Supreme Court, and there were people that didn't agree. There was dissension.
Right, of course.
They didn't agree that a woman should be given the same rent, basically the same pay to pay for her rent or her mortgage as a man. This is 1970s. So throughout this world, throughout this country, and in most countries today, it's even worse than it is in this country. So it's just fascinating to me that in this day and age, that a man that's built so much and meant so much to this country can go into in our industry, in our hotel, and be discriminated against. And again, I'm saying allegedly because I don't know what's in someone's heart.
Right.
I'm not looking for a lawsuit. I am not saying this hotel in any way, shape, or form prejudice against it. I'm just saying, to me, if it if it smells like a flower and it looks like a flower, it must be a flower.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Anthony. That makes a whole lot of sense what you're taking. So what kind of tools do we have within us to make sure that we're always being cognizant of all of this extra stuff that we should be focused on and dealing with to make sure that what's true in our heart comes out to the universe?
Everything I learned in kindergarten. I'm not going to teach an employee not to be racist. I can't teach that.
Right.
That you learn that in your family. If you're a racist, you learn that in your family, and I'm sorry. I mean, you just didn't have a good upbringing, and there's nothing I'm going to be able to do. So that's why it's important as a general manager or any leader of any company to interview every single employee, because my bullshit meter is probably the best bullshit meter in the world, and I'm going to be able to read some of that. And it'll be an instinct sometimes, but there's nothing. I mean, you can do sensitivity training till your head explodes. Okay, if you're a racist, you're a racist.
That's right. Yeah, it's something that's been deeply programmed within you from when you were a child, and you really have to work hard to get past it. People have. I saw this amazing TED Talk with a white supremacist, or I should say former white supremacist, who came around and saw the light and is now fighting against that. I highly recommend you all check that on TED Talks. I wish I could remember his name right now, but I think he also had a show on CNN one Sunday night. Really, really interesting, fascinating guy. I think you should all look into it. All right.
I'm not saying you can't. People don't change. I'm just saying, if I'm running a hotel, I just don't have I'm hopeful we'll have sensitivity training. We'll have all the policies and procedures so we can make sure that doesn't happen. But that's a difficult thing to deprogram. What's important to me is relationships, and HD Supply has had a relationship with me for many years. Anytime I worked at a hotel, was general manager, developer, whatever I was doing, I call HD Supply, and they have over 100,000 products. Anytime I need anything, whether it be logo items, whether it be guest room supplies, whatever it is, they're there. I need an oven or I need a bathrobe, they're there. They have over 100 certified master hotel supply professionals to help you. Real people that have worked in hotels so they can help you and really understand what you're going through. They have the tools, the technology, and the specialized service. And I truly believe in them. First time I spoke to HD Supply, I said, we have 0 listeners by advertising for us. And said, well, usually we need to know how many listeners you have. And what I said is, we may have 1 or we may have 1 million. We don't know. Give us a shot. They did that. That's loyalty. So whether they're supplying your hotel or whether they're being a loyal friend after all these years, they're the company that I go to bat with.
All right, so let's do. I want to do another story.
Something
right now.
A little bit heavier.
Right? So, yeah, now that we've been having such fun and games with that conversation, I thought we'd look at something else. So, another big issue that we're seeing right now is the whole notion of sexual harassment and assault, and we're really in this heightened awareness now with the hashtag Me Too movement.
So I was right. It's going to be something lighter.
That's right. Yeah. So we like to keep it light over at here at Checking In with Anthony and Glenn. But let me tell you something, Anthony. It's really interesting to see how this particular issue has also come to the fore in a big way, such as our the racism issue that's being coming to the fore a lot more. It's great that we're out there. We're discussing all of these things so we can help move society to a better place. And now companies such as Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, IHG, in fact, more than a dozen large-size hotel chains are providing personal safety devices by 2020 to all employees who deal one-on-one with guests. And the companies are also going to train staff to identify and report harassment and publish anti-sexual harassment policies in multiple languages, which is really, really cool. The devices are going to vary, however, by hotel, but a lot of them, I think, are going to be Wi-Fi enabled, for example, and the American Hotel and Lodging Association is backing the effort and says around 3/4 of their 25,000 member hotels are participating already in this program. Really smart, really interesting. I think back, Anthony, to the episodes that people seem to have had with Weinstein, these women being invited up to the hotel rooms, being alone, or a Cosby incident where a woman is alone with a man who's up to nefarious means. By having a device such as like this, it's kind of like, I hate to make a joke, but I'm going to do it anyway. I've fallen and I can't get up. You push the little button. It's kind of like I'm being sexually harassed to get me out of here right now. It's the same kind of idea. I think it's a smart idea. I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's one that really shows that these companies care about their employees. How do you see it?
Well, first I'm going to do a disclaimer.
All right.
Because we're talking about some hot topics. Mm-hmm. If you don't like not so much opinions, but if you don't like our thoughts and you don't like the topics we're talking about because we're maybe hitting some topics that are sensitive, please turn our podcast off and listen to somebody else. Because one of the things I love about doing this podcast, and one of the things like this topic is bringing out in me, is like I'm actually letting people see a little bit different side of me, because on TV, I'm not there. I'm there to do business, and that's it. Here, these are my opinions. These are my thoughts. These are my stories. These are your opinions. These are your stories. So if we do that, please don't write on our Facebook page. Please don't send us text messages. Don't DM me and tell me that you don't call us names. If you don't like some of the things that we say, or you don't like the content of the show, please unsubscribe to the podcast, because I really don't give a shit.
Right.
So with that said,
so what do you? Now that we've had the disclaimers, we've read all the legalese, we've read the fine print.
So with that said, it's not only about time. It's unfortunate that in our industry, it takes something like this for us to pay attention. Think about this for a second. You have a strange person checking into a hotel room. You have a housekeeper knocking on the door.
Right.
The gentleman says, come in.
Mm-hmm.
The young lady says, would you like me to come back? No. You can go about cleaning the room.
Right.
So the gentleman or lady, whatever, is in the room, and their housekeeper's cleaning in the bathroom. They're trapped. They're absolutely trapped.
That's right.
What other industry, think about it, what other industry where a stranger walks into your room, sees you half undressed, potentially, sees basically you're living in their home, the hotel room's a home,
Right.
and you're trapped in the room, and there's a double bolt on the door and a chain. You can't escape. It is not only timely and it's important, it's an embarrassment to our industry that we haven't done it before.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there's a quote here from Erica Alexander, Marriott's Chief Lodging Officer of the Americas, that actually addresses what you're saying here. The cultural conversations have changed, and we've gotten smarter. I think that's a great way of putting it.
I think it's a bullshit cop-out.
Do you?
Man, you're really getting my blood going today.
Good.
No, I think
Why
it's
is that
I think that's crap. Not what she's saying is crap, because she's probably a very respectful person, and she's probably wonderful. But so in no way, shape, or form am I saying that she's wrong. What I'm saying is, let's take it back to you go into a hotel room and you see a sign in the bathroom that says, oh, we are environmentally friendly. So you know what's coming, right?
Right.
We want
To not wash your stuff.
To wash your stuff because we don't want to spend a lot of money.
Right.
Did they really give a crap about their environment? Hold on, let me finish. So the answer is absolutely not.
Right.
They do things in the hotel industry, or we do things in the hotel industry because we're trying to save money all the time.
Right.
So the reason this hasn't happened, the reason we haven't given people these devices is because we don't want to spend the money. I mean, for years to convince an owner to give me walkie-talkies.
Right.
Okay, good walkie-talkies, radios. It's extreme for them to pay for good walkie-talkies and radios. So it absolutely is a funding issue. And they have to be shamed. And to this day, I guarantee you, I'll walk into 90% of the independent hotels in America and say, we're going to give housekeepers these devices. It's going to cost you X amount of dollars a device.
Right.
They're going to say no.
Right. Okay, Anthony, I totally agree with you and also disagree at the same exact time.
Ooh, let's go.
I know. So on the
Let's go, Glenn.
The agree side, I definitely think that what's prompting this is somebody woke up and said, holy crap, we're going to get sued. At some point, it's going to be a big problem. So
yeah, let's not do the right thing. Let's just not get sued.
Yeah, right. That's what I think is really behind it at the same point. But is this an issue that you thought about when you were running hotels?
100%.
Then why didn't you enact it?
Because I'm stupid.
Right.
I didn't think there was any technology that could. This is what I did. Okay, so maybe I'm not as stupid as I thought. Mm-hmm. I didn't know the technology existed if it existed back in the day. I'll tell you what I did. I did not allow a housekeeper to be in a room with a guest.
Right.
Ever. And you always had to put housekeeper in room on the door, and you had to deadbolt the door so the guest couldn't get in with his key. Okay? And then they would knock on the door. You would look through the peephole. You would put the chain on, and you would say, would you like me to clean the room? Yes. Okay, can you come back in 15 minutes? No, I'd like to clean the room. You open up the door and you immediately leave. That's the policy that I've instituted in every hotel that I can remember since the day I was born into this business. Now, or I've had policies back earlier in my career where two housekeepers would have to be in the room.
Right.
Okay, so yes, I've done what I could because that was always shocking to me that we allow this to happen.
Okay, so while I did disagree with you, you put out a great counterpoint, so that really annoys me that I have to cede this one to you. I hate being wrong. Now I feel like I'm home with my wife.
It's listen, we all have common sense.
Yeah.
Even people that don't have a lot of it. What we have to do is we have to think about what we feel is the right thing to do. So strip away your emotions, strip away your ego, strip away everything that you've been programmed to do from a corporation or from maybe a bad household. And think of yourself as just a human being and think about your mother, your daughter, your son being in that situation. And think, because most people most people, unless you have mental illness or you're a psychopath, which is obviously mental illness, you're deep down you're a good person, because I really think most people are born without prejudice. I think we can debate that forever, right? But so think about, and don't all that, or put yourself in that situation. It's more than that. Strip away everything. And so when you come across something like that, and maybe that's the first time I thought about this, maybe that's why I came up with that policy,
right,
to ensure housekeepers are given them as much security as possible, because no one trained me. I've never been trained a day in my life. No one showed me that. No one showed me the light. I came up with that policy because I probably said to myself, okay, self, yes. Or maybe I looked at the Great Gazoo and I said, Great Gazoo, what should I do in this situation? It's simple. It costs no money. I don't have to ask permission. Just get it done, and I can at least do the best I can do. One of the things that fascinates me with owners of hotels is they can have fire procedures that aren't up to code. They can have things that they know are dangerous. I just literally had this conversation with an owner not too long ago, and I said, what do you know about fire safety? And he looked at me. He didn't even answer the question. He knows nothing about fire safety, and he owns a beautiful hotel here in the city. But thank God the fire department makes sure in New York City every code is adhered to. My point being is that people just don't give a crap.
Right.
And unless you really force yourself to give a crap, or somebody's got to tell you to do something, you got to self-regulate yourself. And you have to self-regulate yourself, sometimes force yourself to not be a victim of your circumstance, because I love victims. I hate effing victims that, well, no one told me. Well, I didn't know. You don't know that it's a bad idea to put a woman in a room with a strange man? That hasn't come into your brain?
Right.
Well, no one ever told me that. I was like, well, no one ever told me that either.
Right. It reminds me of that Seinfeld
or
episode.
vice versa. It could be a man being victimized by a woman.
Right.
I don't want to,
Yeah, totally. It's like that Seinfeld episode where George Costanza had sex in the office with the cleaning lady, and he's like, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that? I didn't know." So that was really really funny episode. Of course, I think they're all funny. Anthony, we have this proclivity to keep talking. We got to wrap up this show. We're about out of time. Tell me something I don't know.
Well, first of all, I want to know what this we're out of time thing is, because I don't see a supervisor or a director or a producer looking at us telling us we're out of time. So I'm going to challenge you on this we're out of time.
Okay. Are you?
And I'm going to say, because we were talking about this, I want to go back to one more example.
All right.
We had that massive shooting in Vegas.
Right.
And after that, a lot of people blamed the hotel. And they said, well, why would you not look at it? Because the gentleman who apparently was the shooter had a do not disturb, allegedly, sign on his door. And people in the press and a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks said, well, why didn't you take off the do not disturb sign and just go in the room? So then I think it was Disney that came out with, well, we don't have do not disturb signs anymore. So did it take this act for them to implement something like that? And do we have to wait for these unbelievable acts for these things to happen?
Yes. That's what we do in our society. We react. We aren't proactive. We see it with the TSA. I can give another example with Disney. That poor little baby kid who got eaten by the alligator, right? Now all of a sudden there are signs out there. As a culture, we're not prompted to do stuff that's right and honest and, righteous until it gets thrown in our faces.
And it's interesting you say that about the alligator, because one of the things that fascinated me about that moment is there's very few places that you completely give up your internal security mechanisms, right? It used to be an airplane. You used to get on an airplane. The pilot knows what he's doing. He's going to fly the airplane. We're going to be okay, right? And maybe one of the last places was Disney World. You were like, I'm going to go to Disney World, and everything is going to be okay. I'm not going to die on the ride. My kid's not going to get eaten by an alligator, because everything is a fantasy, and everything is going to be okay. So that really, opened my eyes that when you run a business, which Disney World runs an incredible business, does an amazing job, when you run a business so well, and people let their defenses down, and they trust you so much that they're allowing their child really to be eaten out like an alligator, because there's no alligators now. Well, even though the sign says there's alligators, there's no alligators. It's Disney World, right? That you have a responsibility, an extreme responsibility. Now, so let's look at it on the other side. So maybe, or definitely, they could have done a better job because that was a guest.
Right.
In our industry, we don't take the same seriousness with our guests as we do with our employees. So that's why it's taken us so long to finally think about having mechanisms so housekeepers can wear in case they're in a situation and they can press the button. Because we don't really look at our employees as assets and as sometimes humans. We just look at them as tools in our shed.
Right.
So that's why it's taken so long for us to start protecting our own employees, and it's absolutely an embarrassment. And I'm not talking about our industry because I'm not trying to turn a bad light on the hotel industry. I think that's just in general. Most companies are shamed into doing the right thing, and most companies do it for fiscal reasons. They don't want to be sued. And very few companies do it for the right reasons. And I think it's time to change your own thinking, your own internal mechanism.
So does it matter if they do it for the right reasons as long as they get to that same point?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
It matters because long term, you have to start programming yourself to do the right thing, no matter who's watching. And we've all made mistakes in our lives, but you have to start programming yourself to do the right thing. And that really comes down to, just because you work for somebody, stop being a friggin' robot. You know, we had a conversation with the gentleman at the Four Seasons, and I had such respect for him because he was able to be programmed Four Seasons but still be who he was.
Right, and be sure to check out that show with Tomas Carreras in our feed.
And so it was fascinating to me to listen to him speak, and I've always felt like a renegade because I always felt like, well, I'm not going to listen to the corporation because I don't really believe in a lot of what corporations have to say. And in his opinion, the Four Seasons Corporation has been very much something that he values in his value system. I haven't found that. So I've always been this renegade, and I've always had to listen to my own internal mechanism, and I've always tried to do the right thing. And usually it's the right thing for a victim, for the person who's the weakest person in the room. I'm the first person to jump up because, man, I love a fight with a bully. There's nothing more than I like fighting a bully.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of fun, putting people in their place when they're egregiously wrong.
I don't care how big
something.
you are. I think even if I get killed, I love fighting bullies.
You got that Brooklyn in you.
Because most of the time it's fake bravado.
Right, totally. Yeah, I mean, you get in their faces, and then all of a sudden they back off.
Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Absolutely. Anthony, do I have permission at this point to move on to the final parts of this program?
Yes, because our big crew of directors and producers are telling us that we have to move on.
Well, I'm just trying to save us some time here because
I got you,
you know how it works. We got to record several of these shows in a day. A little behind the scenes mystery for you guys that we're actually not meeting twice every single week to record these things. Although that would be fun if we could do that
and sometimes we do. So it's that time of the show. You have to ask me a question.
All right. Tell me something I don't know about you, Anthony.
Well, it's not really about me, but I will tell you I have something in my brain that is interesting since we were talking about Disney World.
It's not the Tuma. What is it?
Well, I kind of just led the question. Who has the most Academy Award wins in history?
Well, I'll have to say Walt Disney at that point, who also got an honorary Oscar for the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The only, I guess it was the biggest Oscar ever because it was one large-size Oscar with 7 dwarf Oscars with it, right?
He has more Academy Awards than any person in history.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you know?
So that's something about me. But, well, actually, I'll tell you something about me. I was 9 years old when the first time I went to Disney World, and I was fascinated. And I remember when they started building Epcot, and again, you have this sense of wonderment, and they have such an obligation to keep you safe and secure because you just feel like I'm going to go to Disney World and it's like going to heaven. Everything's going to be okay.
Speaking about Epcot and going to heaven, I've got this great book, and I'll bring it the next time we get together. It was all about building Epcot. So it came out in like 1982 before the park even came out. It was all these behind-the-scenes pictures and construction pictures, and I even have one from 1971 or 2 when the original Magic Kingdom Park opened, all with these behind-the-scenes pictures about how they created that property, too. I think you'll get a kick out of those.
I can't wait till we start doing these podcasts with video because I'm going to describe Glenn. Think of a 5-year-old boy who was just told he was going to get a lollipop if he sat up and he smiled and he got excited. He looked like a 5-year-old boy getting a lollipop. He looked so excited to tell that story. I'll tell you a little story.
I love my Epcot books.
I'll tell you a little story. When I took over Nickelodeon Resort in Orlando,
Right.
the first thing I did was grabbed a Disney book, Walt Disney book that he wrote. And the first line or first paragraph, it says, "Don't ever build anything for children. Build it for parents and children will follow."
Yep.
I thought that was fascinating.
That is a fascinating notion. And I'll give myself a little plug right now. If you want to check out my No Vacancy with Glenn Haussman show, I got an interview coming up soon, or it may already be out now, with Dan Cockrell. He was VP over at the Magic Kingdom until a few months ago when he moved on. But great story, great leadership show, great understanding of what goes on behind the scenes there. So, Anthony, you ready for me to tell you something?
But first, the gentleman that you were just talking about, what was his name?
Dan Cockrell, son of Lee Cockrell, who was a major executive at Disney as well, who I'm also... Maybe we could get him on our show.
So I want to know, did Mickey Mouse fire him, force him into retirement, or did he leave on his own terms?
That's a great question. And
Okay. Because, Mickey Mouse is still in charge over there.
that's what I hear.
People think it's I was going to say Michael Eisner, but he's left a long time ago.
Yeah, Iger's been there for over a decade now.
Yeah, oh, my God, there was a really funny thing on one of the morning shows. I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the show. It'll come to me. But where it was actually a station that was owned by Disney World, and the host used to make fun of Iger and used to make believe he was Mickey Mouse and used to like say bad things about Iger. It was hysterical. I can't remember what the name of the show was. But anyway, so tell me something I don't know.
All right, so I had something planned, but I'll tell you something that's Disney related. My birth date, November 18th, is actually the same birth date as the first Mickey Mouse Steamboat Willie cartoon ever premiered, which was November 18th, 1928.
Wow.
That's right.
I couldn't care less about some knowledge that I just got ever in my life.
That's right. Yet here I am, strutting around like a peacock here. Like, that's the coolest piece of news. How about my birthday is also the same as Alan Shepard, the first American to get launched into space?
That's cool.
All right, there you go.
All right. I knew you were the coolest person I know.
Well, at least he's finally reading the lines that I give him. This is really great.
And to get back there a little bit, and before we end the podcast, I know we're going to end it in 1 second, but it really is, as I'm coming into this podcast world, and I'm starting to kind of give people maybe more of an insight to my thinking or kind of how I came up in the industry, and you've been at this podcast thing for a while. I'm starting to really appreciate and understand this forum.
Right. Because
if you look at the other forums, if you say something on NBC at 8 o'clock, you're going to get, crucified. If you say something on radio, you'll be less crucified, but you'll still be crucified. Podcasting is really the only place you can really say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, it's an amazing medium. I absolutely love this.
And I'm always going to be appropriate within my guidelines.
That makes one of us.
No, because I'm not that guy. I'm never going to say anything. I'm going to try not to offend people, and I'm going to try not to because it's not that I'm going to try to offend people. I don't want to offend anybody because it's not my nature. However, I really like this forum where I am able to say things that I feel strongly about. And the two topics you talked about today, I have 3 young girls.
Right.
And, so when you bring up the topics that we talked about today, it really hit home. And for me to think that my girls would be victimized because of their gender, whether it be victimized because of the way they're dressed or the way they present themselves, or just simply they won't get a job because they're a woman, just overwhelms me sometimes with fear that they have to work so much harder to prove themselves. And same thing with my friends and my African American friends or my disabled friends. They have to work so much harder in this world to compete.
That's right.
And it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And so we can do people in power, people who are not in power. Whether you open a door for someone, whether you smile at someone, whether you help someone, you give somebody $5 and not want something back.
Right.
It's doing something for someone and not expecting anything in return is the greatest thing you can do. And if we all just did a little bit of that every single day, it really will. And I see acts of kindness every day, whatever race you are, whatever gender you are, and it really makes my heart feel warm that, this country and this world isn't as screwed up as we think it is, because the person in the White House doesn't run this country. We run this country. Every act of kindness, everything that we do, the way we represent our family, the way we represent our names, the way we represent our culture or our company, that's what people are going to remember. And so every one of us has that control.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the, you know what, I try to put out as much positive energy as I possibly can. I think the more positive energy you get, begets back positive energy. When you smile at people, and it sounds so cliche, but when you smile at people, they smile back, and it catches on. But if you get that negativity and you put that out there, that's what's going to come back to you.
Well, when we just walked into the elevator before, there was a young lady that was behind us, and we both opened up the door, held it with our arms, and she walked through, and she smiled at us, and she's like, well, thank you. Like, she felt like, okay, here's the queen. She's coming into the elevator.
Right.
And we were just being gentlemen. And it was just, and I'm sure that made her feel like, oh, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. So anyway, where can we find you, Glenn?
Oh my gosh! Find me at Traveling Glenn on Instagram, on whatever it's called, Twitter, and of course check out No Vacancy News on Facebook.
And you can find me at Anthony Hotels everywhere you want to be, or you can find us on Checking In with Anthony and Glenn on Facebook.
And Instagram, though, we got to really start doing something.
I was going to say, man. Well, what's so funny?
Find us there. You're not going to get anything out of it, but we'll be there.
What's so funny? You took over Facebook. I took over Instagram. Facebook looks great right now. Instagram sucks. All right.
At this point, we should probably set up a Patreon page so you guys can give us some donations, so we can hire somebody that can handle the Instagram account, so we can look really cool doing it. I want to thank everybody for listening. So for Anthony and myself, Glenn, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Checking In.
It's Checking In with Anthony and Glenn, teaching you to be the hotelier that you wanna be. It's Checking In with Anthony and Glenn.